to get together every Monday with Angus, our rector, and try and see if we can network and help people and to find a job. And secondly, a debt advisory. Now, there are also very good non-Christian ways. I think last time I mentioned the Citizens Advice Bureau, which is I'm a huge fan of. But also Christians can help there as well. And just, poor people, stressed out, we should feel real compassion for them and do something about it. And just sit down and say, look, there are often ways out of the financial problems that people are in, give them advice, and show the love of the Lord Jesus through the gospel and also through these practical ways.
And it's so great that we've got that message to bring to people. As you say, that it's so practical. It's not just believe in Jesus and everything will be okay. That it's believe in Jesus and allow him to practically work through enough. And yes, we'll come alongside you. Yes, we'll walk with you in it. But he's going to do it in your life for you.
That's right. I mean, if you think, Doug, of the Lord Jesus, God who made the whole universe saw his creation in the total mess, and he didn't leave it. He sent his only son, to literally roll his sleeves up and be a carpenter and work in Nazareth. I mean, must have been a fantastic carpentry place in Nazareth. So that we're called to follow the Master. Jesus says, take up your cross, deny yourself and follow me. So we're called as best we can in a feeble way to follow the Lord Jesus, who went around doing good. And he also went around preaching with the gospel. So we must do both.
Great. We're going to be opening the text and the emails now. As you see, we're going to seek to be practical. One of the things I want to do, first of all, though, is just set the scene of the problems we've had, look upon it a little more, maybe a little bit globally, but certainly nationally, with Jeremy to understand those things. But then we're going to be trying to bring it down to real practicalities of what the Lord can do in our lives and what we can do, as we've just been talking about there, to meet others. And so do bring the text and the emails in. If you've got issues here, we will seek to bring them in. We cannot give detailed financial advice today. I mean, that's not what we're here to do. But we can point you in the right direction, and we can share principles with you as far as that's concerned. So do get on, do call us, do share where you are in these situations at the moment. So you can text us at the moment on 07781 472647, and you can email us at live@talkgod.com. And as we're chatting, I will bring these things in with Jeremy at this time, and later on we'll be opening the phone lines for you to be able to talk direct with us. Jeremy, some have termed, this is a quote, I'm not quite sure where I got it from in the end, but I've got it in quote marks, so somebody obviously said it. But as what is happening is the worst crisis since the Great Depression, and that we're not out of it yet. How do you respond to that from what you're seeing? Because as we're seeing in a minute, a few people are talking about green shoots and all sorts of other things, but how do you see where we are in that financial? Was it as bad? Are we out of it or getting out of it?
So to give you the big picture answer, Doug, first of all, the crisis that we're still in, we're not out, is in my view the worst crisis since the Great financial crisis, since the Great Depression, yes. And although if we went back 1 year, I think financial experts would be amazed actually how well things are going. I'm of the view that we're far from out of the woods yet. And the main reason for that is that 1 year ago we had the collapse of Lehman Brothers, which could have destroyed a large part of the world's banking system. I read an interview the other day with one of the most famous fund managers in the world, who 1 week ago last year called his wife, this is a guy who manages billions of dollars, and said, go to the cash machine in California and get out as much cash as you can. I'm not sure the banking system will be giving out cash in a day's time. So if you can imagine, Doug, a scenario where ordinary people in the UK, in the US, everywhere would have taken their Cashpoint cards to get money out to pay for petrol, for food for their children, and there was no money. That's a very serious situation. By the way, when that happened in Germany in 1930, 3 years later, the Nazis were in power. So you tend to risk, serious civil disorder if you have a complete collapse of the banking system. So what the government did was effectively nationalise the banks that without government intervention would have gone bankrupt. So in the UK, that's two banks, Royal Bank of Scotland and Lloyds. RBS was a big mess, and Lloyds got itself into a mess by acquiring, encouraged by Mr. Brown, HBOS. And those banks are still majority controlled by the government. Now, the best way to look at it overall, Doug, is the government has solved a burning short-term problem by creating a long-term problem. Let me use an analogy. Please, it's a bit like your house is on fire, and the fire brigade comes along with hundreds and hundreds of hoses and puts out the fire, but then floods your house. So you've still got a problem. It just takes a bit more. It's maybe not quite as serious as having a pile of rubble, but you've got now a flooded house. And what the government has done is it's taken the vast expansion of bad credit and bad debt that could not be repaid, that had been built up by the banks, leading to the collapse of Lehman Brothers, and has moved it to all of us as taxpayers. So that bad debt has not been repaid, it's been nationalised, and the government has paid for that bad debt by printing money. So quantitative easing, QE, which is a phrase that Mr. Peston on the BBC likes to talk about, is just a fancy way of saying printing money.
Right. What was it? Quantitative easing?
Quantitative easing.
That's very interesting.
Yes. So what that means is the government just injects more money into the banking system. The government owns the ultimate weapon of financial mass destruction, the printing press.
Right.
But that money is only good if people in other countries will accept it. So the UK has dramatically increased the level of government debt, and somebody has to pay for that, Doug. And there are only really two ways out of it. One is, which is going to happen, that there's going to be increases in taxes and major reductions in public expenditure. And the second way, which is probably more appealing if you're a politician, is that people wouldn't mind some inflation, because inflation then erodes the level of debt. The problem with inflation, as the Germans discovered in the 30s, is that it's difficult to manufacture a little inflation.
Yes. I mean, just before we went on, we checked the news, and as expected, the bank held the interest rates at 0.5%. But it also talked about continuing to pump in, as you were talking about there, 175 billion into the economy. Now, I don't understand things, obviously, the way you understand them, but the analogy I've got was not the flooded house, but the stretch of road where there's always a bottleneck. So what they do is they create another 100 metres of dual carriageway, and all they do is push the bottleneck, 100 metres down the road. Isn't that what's going to happen? Because this has to come home to roost sometime. If we're pumping all this money into the economy, at some point we've got to pay it back. At some point, somebody's got to, whichever government is there at the time, and when it finally, I suppose the buck stops is really a good analogy at that point. There's going to be major problems, surely, at that point.
Absolutely, Doug. So we are solving the immediate super urgent problem, as you said with your analogy of the motorway, by creating another problem down the road. I happen to think, though, that keeping interest rates low, given the precarious state of the economy, is a good thing. Especially, there's financial costs and there's human costs. And the thing that is probably the most important in terms of human cost is unemployment. And unemployment is a lagging indicator of the economy. The stock market, by the way, which is, in my view, got somewhat ahead of itself, is a leading indicator. In other words, people think in 2-3 years things will improve, therefore we'll buy shares. Unemployment is the reverse. It takes 2-3 years of improvement before unemployment starts to improve. So one of the most important issues for the government is to avoid the situation that I remember growing up at the end of the 70s, where you have millions and millions of people who want to work but can't work, because that's soul destroying. So we are storing up a problem. We as taxpayers have to pay for this. Somebody has to pay for the cost of what's been going on. And also, we as a nation, Doug, not just as a government but as individuals, we've spent more money than we own. It's as simple as that. The levels of individual debts in the UK for the average person in the UK has gone up for 25 years in a row, and it hasn't really come down.